Thank you, Brandon. I call him B. Thank you, B. How can we have peace in the Middle East when there's none at home? How can we have understanding in the land when there's none in the woman and there's none in the man? How can we heal wounds of the world if we cannot heal our own? Where does this peace on earth begin if not in the home? 2 years ago, the world as we knew it changed. More than ever, there was a disruption to our global equilibrium because of this viral pathogen known as COVID-19. It wreaked havoc and has now claimed the lives of over 1 million Americans and over 6 million lives worldwide. This harsh reality forced us to be cognizant of our own morbidity and mortality and reminded us constantly about living life in the present. And if that were not enough stress, we had to witness the horrific acts of police brutality, racial injustice, hate crimes, and mass shootings. And all of this political unrest and dissension, the war in Ukraine, the disruption in Afghanistan. This pandemic and its aftermath has triggered a 25% increase in the prevalence of depression and anxiety worldwide. It's highlighted the need for more attention to our mental health than ever before. It's crunch time, folks. We have to be more protective of our mental health and mental stability. So I want to thank the Articulate team. Thank you, Brandon, for the invitation. Because I have attended several career workshops, and I've never really seen mental health considerations being a part of the overall makeup of the career trajectory. So I appreciate just that thoughtfulness in terms of building this workshop, and thank you overall to the Articulate team. And if you think about mental health, and we think about all these things going on, we're trying to, get gun laws to protect things. We're having protests, and this is all great, and it helps to some degree. But what if, this is my fantasy, what if everyone worked from the inside out? What if we became really diligent and took care of our mental health the same way we took care of our family, our jobs? What if we really did that interest? I wonder how much things could change, working from the inside out. So today, my objective is to talk to you first about mental health considerations, specifically as it relates to artists. I'll share some of the things that I've noticed in the artists that I treat in my practice. I want to also share specific lessons that will help you personally and professionally. You see, sometimes we can contribute to our own despair unknowingly, but just from shifting our mindsets, we can make a difference in our overall well-being. And then I want to have an interactive discussion. I want to hear from some of you, a little group therapy, if you will, if you're willing to be vulnerable enough, to share what you've learned in your artist journey, what has helped to sustain you, because I believe one of the wonderful things is you can learn from each other. And then we're going to take a quick inventory. I'm going to pass out some self-care strategies later on. And I want you to look at those self-care strategies and see which ones can you do a little bit more of. What can you do to enhance? So let's begin. Protecting your peace. I'm going to share some life lessons from the sessions that I've had with patients. Now, some of you may probably know that artists have struggled with mental health illnesses dating back to the 1800s. Our first picture here represents Vincent van Gogh, a Dutch painter who has a self-portrait here after he cut his own ear off in anguish, distress, and depression. He was known to have psychotic episodes, bouts of psychosis, and only became famous after his death. And then there was Virginia Woolf, very renowned writer, who eventually ended her life by drowning herself in a lake. Then we have the composer, the creative Robert Schumann, a composer who was so in distress that he signed himself up to live in an asylum, and he would eventually die in the asylum. Now, how many of you would be signing up to go in the hospital, a mental health facility? Probably not many of us, so imagine the level of distress that he must have been under. Virginia Woolf actually had symptoms that at that time they didn't know what it was, but based on the description of her symptoms, she probably had bipolar disorder. Then we have our modern day artists. The first artist is a South African photographer who's used his mental health, used his art as a platform to expose mental health issues. He himself suffers with bipolar disorder. We have Gloria Swain, who's, I think, both a painter and a writer, a poet. She also has done a lot of advocacy work and changed a lot of the culture in Canada because of her exposing and talk about mental health. And many may know that Mariah Carey has also come out as having bipolar disorder and talked about her struggles and how she's able to maintain. So here are some interesting statistics. Did you know that artists are 20 times more likely to suffer from bipolar disorder? They're 10 times more likely to suffer from depression. And they're 18 times more likely to complete suicide than the general population. There's some personality traits that seem to be common to artists. Now, this isn't, not to generalize, but this is something from the research from the Scientific American magazine that has demonstrated about certain artists. They seem to have a high level of intuition. They're very curious. So I see some people nod and say, yeah, that's me, that's me. They're very open-minded. One of the challenges, sometimes they ruminate, so they have racing thoughts. How many times have you awakened out of your sleep to go paint something or to go write something? So it's a gift, but can also be challenging. It can keep you up at night. They have changeable feelings, which I think was the research nice way of saying sometimes they can be a little moody. And they tend to be introverts. So let's test this out. I'm curious how many people, let's take a poll here, in this room are introverts. Okay, so we're looking like maybe 50% here. Now, when I say introvert, I don't mean, because some people say, oh, I'm shy, I'm an introvert. You can be shy and be an extrovert, and you can be a friendly introvert. So what I mean by introvert is that you recharge by spending time alone, and if you're out and about, you prefer to have maybe 3 or 4 people at the most together to congregate because you like the intimacy of moments, where extroverts will more likely, the more the merrier, and then they recharge and get fuel and energy from being with other people. So let's now take the toll again. So who now, based on that definition, feels like they're an introvert? Now the hands. So now we're talking about 70, it looks like about 70% of the room. So that's very interesting. So the challenge here is if you're going inward a lot, sometimes you could be isolated. So here's some the pros and cons, and it's about achieving balance based on this. What they've also learned about artists through the research is that there's more sensitivity. They're very sensitive to the world, and they may be empaths. Empaths are people who really absorb the energy and emotions of other people. So that's something we have to look out for, because it makes you a better artist, but it can also cause distress if you're kind of around a lot of chaos. So here's an interesting perspective of a psychiatrist by the name of Terence Ketter. He's a professor at Stanford University. He actually wrote a book about Van Gogh and studied artists over the course of his career. And he says the arts are more dangerous than other occupations because they require sensitivity to a large extent. And if you go too far, you can pay a price. You can be too sensitive to the world. So in my treatment of artists, and actually there's a psychologist who's the co-director of the mood disorders clinic at Johns Hopkins, she and I also experienced some challenges when I worked at times with some artists, not all, but some artists. Sometimes artists have a resistance to taking medication when I offer it to them because they fear that they may lose their creativity. Even though they're gaining the stability, they fear that their career might be compromised because certain medications may have side effects of nulling out some of that creativity. There also have been reports of emotional numbness from certain medications. And there are medications, honestly, there's enough people to say that it does happen. So with certain antidepressants, what they say is that they no longer feel the joy. Even though they're not depressed anymore, they sometimes have a muted, joyful experience, or happiness feels muted as well. So it feels like it's a lot to compromise. So patients may also focus on the risk of treatment rather than looking at the risk of no treatment. So Dr. Jamison, who's also has bipolar disorder herself, says like, okay, let's say you have bipolar disorder. You don't want your creativity, dampened, but you also don't want to be, in the ER in psychiatric restraints if you have a manic episode, for example, with bipolar disorder. And for those that don't know about bipolar disorder, you have extremes of emotions. You have depression that can last for a few weeks, and then you can move into a manic phase at any time. And that involves euphoria, feeling increased energy, having a lot of ideas going in your head, a million miles a minute. You could feel grandiose, have an inflated self-esteem, becoming more impulsive, and maybe engage in activities that put yourself at more risk. So it can be very damaging, especially in its extreme form, bipolar 1, as opposed to bipolar 2. So these are very, things that we have to process with patients, to help them figure out, hey, are we willing to let's change some medicines and see if we can try something else, or are you willing to take a little bit of knock on that creativity so that we can get your life and your relationships better? So I'm not here to be the bearer of bad news. What I'm here to be is to be a reminder that we have to be protective of our peace and our mental health. So there are some major protective factors that artists have. Artists have a passion that promotes a sense of mastery. That is beautiful. I can't tell you how many patients in here say, I just don't feel fulfilled. They come in my office and say, I feel like I'm missing passion out of my life. So you have this gift, and it's a beautiful gift that people may even envy. So make sure you hone into that, because mastery is a pathway to happiness. Art can also serve as a valuable form of coping. Some people don't have as many coping skills, but you can use that as your own therapy, and it promotes resilience. Artists tend to embrace vulnerability because it's an essential part of their work. I'm giving myself, I'm producing this product, right? I'm sending it out there, so it kind of exposes a little bit of my pain, my past. So there's a beauty in that, and vulnerability breeds connection. Art is also a form of expression. Expression is the pathway to emotional freedom. So when we think about mental health, I like to think about it in terms of components. There's the biology of the self, there's the psychology of ourselves, and then there's the social and spiritual elements that we want to think about. And this is how I govern my treatment, feeding into all of these pathways. So let's talk about the life lessons in biology. The overall goal is to treat your body as a sacred temple. Have proper nutrition. Make sure you stay hydrated. Make sure you stay in exercise. Get those natural endorphins that help to promote mood regulation. Monitor your need for rest and rejuvenation at all times. I used to be kind of a workaholic. I'm in recovery now. But I never forget, I used to be always on the go. I didn't stay in tune with my body. And I was feeling sick one day, and I said, oh, I'm just going to push on. That's what we do, don't we? We push on. And I sat there and vomited all in front of this patient. I was so embarrassed. But it was the biggest lesson for me that you really have to be in tune with your whole temple. Now, as I've worked for over 15 years in psychiatry, I've noticed that a lot of people don't have primary care doctors. I'm like, who's your primary care doctor? Can I send records? Can I get? No primary care doctor. Hasn't done an annual physical in 3 years. We've got to do screenings. We've got to check in every year. And if it's hard to remember, every January, do all your visits. Get them in, you know? And another thing is to be mindful of what we put in our body. Recreational substances. So this can be a dilemma with some artists as well, is that, you know, certain things like mushrooms and cannabis is what they say helps them to think more clearly, or, you know, brighten their mood so they can focus on their art. So one of the things to know is that these things have hazards. So being mindful of the recreational drug use. And then there are lessons in psychology. The first lesson is to embrace and acknowledge your thoughts and feelings. I can't tell you how frequently we as a people can be in denial. I had a patient the other day, and he allowed, after we processed, for me to share this today without, of course, giving his name. He was talking about how his son hasn't spoken to him in 3 years. And I said, oh, that must be tough. He was like, no, I mean, he don't want to talk to me. That's his decision. I'm good. Are you really good? And so he has been to all these doctors working up this gastrointestinal problems, indigestion, stomach aches, headaches, and no one can find what's wrong. I'm like, your body is telling you that you have an issue with the fact that your son doesn't speak to you. Acknowledge your thoughts, acknowledge your feelings. Because if you won't, your body will. And if you don't acknowledge your thoughts and feelings and deal with some of the things from your past, like acknowledge the impact of past traumatic experiences, your marriage will. Your relationships will. Because they're going to show up. Trauma is like a ghost that sneaks up when you don't want it, when it's least expecting. So acknowledge it, understand how it impacts you, understand how it translates to the way you engage in life and the way you see yourself and the world. Have intention with your attention. This is so critical when the pandemic first started, especially before the vaccines. The people who were most anxious were the ones who were just reading about the articles all day. I said, oh my God, you have to stop reading this. You've got to flood some of this negativity with some positivity. Yes, we want to be aware, but you've got to balance that. And so whatever that crisis is in your life, it's okay to pay attention to it, or it's okay to watch the news. It's okay to read about these shootings. It's okay to be aware, but make sure you're intentionally flooding yourself with something to counterbalance that negativity. Is essential. I always tell my patients, happiness just doesn't fall on your lap. You have to pursue it. And having intention with your attention is part of that important journey. The last psychological lesson I have is discover who you are. So many people die not knowing who they were, who they were, knowing what they really wanted in life. They had not a clue, and that is the biggest travesty. So here are some lessons in sociology. Evaluate who you invite into your personal space. Distance yourself from toxic people. Lean in. That's even if they're family members. Sometimes there's this myth and misconception that we have to keep them around. But if they're toxic, they are taking away and chipping away at your spirit. Nurture healthy relationships. Hang out in spaces where you feel accepted. If you're already struggling with self-esteem issues, it becomes a bigger problem if you keep hanging out in spaces where you don't feel accepted, because it will reinforce the message of inferiority and tell you that you are unworthy when that is certainly not the case. So you do not want to compare yourself to others. Limit your time on social media, because that is the route to comparison. People don't realize it, but unconsciously you're comparing your life to these people that seem to have this glossy life. Avoid isolation, seek out mentorship, and identify and engage in other hobbies and passions so you can continue to promote that sense of mastery. Looks like I'm going the wrong way. Okay. Lessons in spirituality. Now, when I'm talking about spirituality, I'm not saying be religious. But if you are a subscriber to a certain religion, there is research that suggests spiritual worship promotes resilience. But if you're not, commune with nature. Be mindful. There are research that shows people who are happy are people who spend a lot of time outdoors or at the beach, at the bodies of water, can help calm, natural remedies for stress. Cultivate practices that nourish your sense of purpose. And if you don't know your purpose, go look at your pain. It could be the gateway to figuring out your purpose. I have a patient, he was coming in and he was struggling with, what do I do with my life? He had bipolar disorder. And he just couldn't figure it out. And I said, well, let's look at your pain. And now he's a global mental health advocate, speaking all over the world. So it can really work if you just look at your pain. It can lead you. Pain plus passion equals purpose. Practice gratitude. Don't just focus on what's wrong in life. Think about the good things and replenish your spiritual self. And one of the ways I love to do that is through music. It can heal your soul. I truly believe that. And there are other books I think we can read, and you can connect to your spiritual community also for support. So I like to give you some pearls of wisdom, some life lessons, some quotes from my patients who've terminated care and moved on. And they said, this is what the biggest lesson I got from this. Now, before I do that, I want to take another poll. Who can tell me what makes a person powerful? What personality trait or what characteristic makes someone powerful? Anyone want to volunteer? Yes, what makes someone powerful to you? Confidence, I love that one. Anyone else? Knowing who you are, that's a big one. Anyone else? Yes. Yes. Self-awareness, that's a big one. So what I see, all of those three things you just mentioned lead to one major thing. When you're confident, when you're self-aware, and what was the other one, young lady, you said? Knowing who you are, then you can have a voice. Never mute your voice. Because I'm a trauma specialist, one of the common things I see is people who are silent. And people are running over them because they are silent. They're not talking about stuff. They're not addressing this. They're not saying, no, that's not okay for you to treat me that way. Your voice is the key to your power. Now, I'm put a disclaimer out there. The tone of the voice and the message is also important, and knowing when, the timing, yes, but never mute it. You can say just about anything to anyone, but it's the delivery package that matters, right? Here's another one, and I see this particularly as minority women, but particularly in African-American women. Let's ditch the cape. It's time to stop being a superwoman. Put the mask on yourself before you apply it to others. Don't live your life running out of oxygen. This is such a huge issue in our community. we've taken a sense of pride and self-esteem from being the one that always helps, and then we don't even know how to ask for help. Be willing to volunteer, intern without compensation. Try different opportunities that will help you better understand who you are, what you're passionate about, and what avenues you can use to excel. A lot of times people are still struggling with who they are and discovering who they are, but then they're sitting silently and they're not moving. I'm here to say, shoot, then aim. Move, then aim. You can find out who you are on the journey of your momentum as you learn about yourself. Here's another one. Do not get caught up competing with others. Run your own race. We've talked about that. Here's another big one. Don't force people and opportunities in your life. Forcing it will break the key in the door. If they want to leave, let them go. So many people are distressed because they're trying to make something happen. I can't tell you how many times suicide attempts happen because the boyfriend or the girlfriend left. You are worth caring about your life. You are worth hanging out here for. Another thing is do not hang out in spaces where you don't feel accepted. We talked about that. And that means that you're embracing your unique and authentic self. I find that artists do pretty well with that. Some artists are considered what the world may call eccentric, and they embrace it. I love that about artists. Listen to your gut, which you all tend to do well. Your thoughts might lead you astray, but your gut doesn't. Ask questions if you are unclear about a certain path to take. Do not shy away from asking for help or clarification. Give yourself permission to explore the world, to learn, but most importantly, to fail. It's a very important thing to see failure as a part of life. Some perfectionists really don't get that. They get stuck in, but what if I don't do well on it? What if the project fails? What if the artwork doesn't go well? What if people don't show up to my gallery? Just show up to the arena. Because you did more than what most people did. You showed up. And although falling in love is wildly exciting and invigorating and exhilarating, is not the only key to happiness. Do not lose yourself in the pursuit of love. I see this a lot. What did Tina say? What's love got to do? Got to do with it. What does it have to do with it when you've lost your peace, when you've lost your mental stability? Choose your friends, circle, and romantic partners wisely. When you have that art exhibit, are they showing up for you? Are they asking people, do you need some water? Are they DJing? Are they doing something? Make sure that the people you bring around you are showing up for you. And get comfortable with getting uncomfortable so that you can grow in life. I only have a few more, y'all. When we speak doubt and negativity about ourselves, our mind believes it. Every cell in your body is listening to your thoughts. So speak positively about your intellect, your creativity, and your ability to lead. It is the key to your success. Here's a big one. Some of us have not had a good life growing up. Travel the journey of radical acceptance of your traumatic past. It is the key to your emotional freedom. And for those who are people-pleasing because they want people to be in their lives because they don't know how worthy they are, because they don't know that people will be there just because of who you are, not what you do for them, stop it. Stop the people-pleasing because it steals your happiness and peace. Here's a big one. Don't allow fear to paralyze you. Do it afraid. But most importantly, out of all of these, know that you are enough. And if you struggle believing that you are enough, please ask the help for a psychotherapist or a psychiatrist. Thinking that you are unworthy will influence every single decision that you make in your life. How can we have peace in the Middle East when there's none at home? How can we have understanding in the land when there's none in the woman and there's none in the man? How can we if we cannot heal our own? Where does this peace on earth begin, if not in the home? Thank you.